Hi everyone and welcome to today's session. So today I'm joined with James Lawther from Squawk Point Consulting. So James is an experienced data leader with extensive experience across a wide range of industries, including finance, retail, manufacturing and IT. He's a problem solver with a talent for getting to the heart of the issue, with a proven ability in advising and consulting on the best path forward. So today, James is going to share his ideas and experience on why your data and analytical strategy sucks. So he will look at some of the common mistakes that are made and share his ideas on how to overcome them issues and to improve your data and analytical strategy. So James, it's over to you to do your thing really.
Thank you very much, Perry, and thank you very much for joining, guys. So first of all, I should here we go. So why your data and analytics strategy sucks. So that's a little bit patronizing, isn't it? And I'm afraid, because I've got no idea what your data and analytics strategy is, I've got no idea if it sucks at all or not. But hopefully, but just thought as engaged, you're giving you something to smile about. So first of all, to introduce myself. So Perry says I'm wildly experienced. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I have, over the past 30 years, worked for a number of different companies, you can see here. And then always in data or operations roles. So it's all about how you use data to make your organization work better. And then I think you can gather from this, one of two things. Either, as Perry says, I've got a wealth of experience, or I'm incapable of holding down a job. Yeah, both is possible, but hopefully after we talk through this for 15 minutes, you'll get a sense and you'll understand, well, you can make your own decision on that. So, data. I'll start off with this. So it's been said, I think it was first said in 2006 or something like that, data is the new oil. And it's a bit of a hackneyed phrase, really. But what do they mean by that? Well, I suppose data is like oil in that by itself, it's pretty useless stuff. Yeah, it's only when you process it and understand it and make products out of it, that's when it really starts to add value to your organization. But there the analogy falls apart a little bit because oil is a finite resource and diminishing, but the amount of data available is growing like crazy. So I had a quick search on the internet. You shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet, it must be said. But I found out on the internet that in 2010, there were 2 zettabytes of data available in the world. And as of 2022, that's climbed to 97 zettabytes, which begs the question, first of all, what the hell is a zettabyte, right? So I looked that up, and apparently a zettabyte is 1 sextillion bytes. So I'm not particularly much wiser when I found that out, but that is a 10 with 21 zeros on the end. So to put that into context, if you count, or if you've got the time to count all the grains of sand and all the beaches in all the world, apparently that is 5 sextillion grains. I'm not sure whether they counted the Sahara Desert when they did that, but that means there's 20 times more data than there are grains of sand in the world. And what they're saying is that that will double over the next 5 years. So there's a problem there, yeah, which is you've got all this stuff, which is really valuable stuff if you use it properly, and it's growing like crazy. So that leads to the next question, which is, well, how on earth are you going to control all of this data and all of this information? I'm not sure this slide adds much. It's very managerial. I think it's put in there to give the sort of aura of competence. But how are you going to control it, and what is the strategy that you're going to use all of this data? So let me talk you through what's in the past, some of the sort of common ways in which you'll do that. So someone will come up and they will start off with something which looks a bit like this. So this is a conceptual data architecture. So I'll start off and I'll say, well, what's the conceptual data model? Where's the data coming from? Where am I going to put it? And how am I going to present it and make it useful? So you start with that. Then the next thing people will do is then move on to something which looks a little bit like this, which is a data model, a logical data model. And this is really hard work, right? So this is about understanding what each of those data points means and defining it and explaining how it relates to everything else. And, I've worked with data models, and they've got a difficult job because they've got to get everybody to agree what each of these pieces of data means. So then you pull together your logical data model. Then what happens next is you pull together some sort of technology stack. So how are you going to use all of that? And then you'll go into a room with a bunch of very bright technologists, and they'll tell you something like, well, you need to use Apache Spark because that will integrate all your data and help you deal with data parallelisms. And then you need Lightdash because you can take your DBT project and you can use that to pull together a full BI stack for your organization. And they'll talk all sorts of stuff like this, which the only technology you really need is the one I put in there bottom right, which is Anodin, which will take your headache and make it go away, because you're talking to some people with some seriously pointy heads, right? So they'll bamboozle you a little bit. And then when you've agreed on what your technology stack is, then you'll come together and you'll pull together some sort of physical data model, which is almost like a combination of your technology stack and your logical data model, and show in quite some detail how the whole thing is going to work and how much it's going to cost. And that in and of itself is so far so good, but then somebody else will say, well, the other thing you need, and you can download this slide off the internet, it's a very good slide, I like it. You need a operating model, because what your operating model does is it bridges between strategy and execution. I looked at it for about 5 minutes before I tweeted, but that's what this slide's telling you. But I shouldn't jest, because actually you built this thing, you need to know how you're going to use it. So you know what's your structure, what's your ways of working, who's going to do what. So you need to build all of that together. And so once you've done all of that, you'll finally end up with some sort of strategy document, which will pull together your conceptual data model and your logical data model and some sort of technology stack, some physical data modeling, target operating model, and you'll have a business case. And when you pull that together, you're into several £1 million. Yeah. Incidentally, you should never trust anybody who's wearing £10,000 worth of watch and puts the data together in a 3D pie chart, because they're obviously trying to pull one over on you. Yeah. So that is traditionally how people have looked at their data strategies. And I have a bit of a problem with that. And my problem is, I think it's putting the cart before the horse, because you've got a sort of solution first approach to the problem. So what are the issues with that approach? Well, I think there's 3 really. So the first is, you imagine you work for a supermarket. So the average supermarket, I am told, stocks about 40,000 items, which is probably why I can never find the pesto when I'm looking for it. But if it stocks 40,000 items, it's also got 40,000 places to put those 40,000 items. So you've got a big grid of opportunity there. I think 1.6 billion if I counted in zeros right. Then when you overlay on that all the different prices and all the different promotions and what the weather's doing and what the different demographics are and all the different store layouts, you can see that all of a sudden you've got this huge range of complexity that you're trying to model in your data. And you don't stand hope in hell of getting it right. Yeah. So you can miss stuff. So there's the first problem, just complexity. The second problem is how you present that information. So what this picture is, this is a picture of the inside of 3 Mile Island, the power station, the nuclear power station in the States. And in 1979, they had or very nearly had a very nasty accident there. Closest America's had to a full-blown nuclear incident. And what you can see here is the control panels. So this is, the pre-digital era, but they had something like 1,900 different pieces of information presented on these control panels. And when the inspectors came round after the incident, one of the things so the root cause of the problem was 2 valves had stuck. Yeah, and that's what caused the issue. But when the inspectors came and had a look, they came around and they said, well, actually, your real issue is your operators are just suffering from data overwhelm. They've got too much information coming at them. So all those pieces of information, they weren't really ordered in any sort of sensible way. They weren't labelled. There was no idea, if the dial's pointing over this way, should it be pointing over that way? There was no idea what was right and wrong. And interestingly, well, not interestingly, tragically, the 2 lights which showed the valves in question, one was positioned down by the floor level somewhere, so you couldn't really see it. And the other one had a maintenance tag hanging over it. So if you can't present 1,900 pieces of information, what chance have you got with all the data that you could collect now? So how you present it is really a big problem. And then the final issue, well, one of the final issues is one of timeliness. So there is a lovely story about Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein, he got pulled up by one of his colleagues. And his colleague said to him, well, what paper are you going to give to the students? Yeah, what exam paper are you going to give them? And Einstein sort of shrugged and said, well, I'll give them the same ones I gave last year. And the colleague was, thunderstruck. You can't do that. The answers will be out there. They'll cheat. People will know what's going on. And Einstein just shrugged and he said, well, the answers are totally different this year to last year. And his point being, the world moves on. Now, if the amount of data in the world is going to double in the next 5 years, you can rest assured that the answers are going to change quite significantly as well. So timeliness is really important, the speed at which you can do things. And if it's going to take 3 years to implement your strategy, you probably end up worse than you started off with. So this causes a problem, right? Because on the one hand, I'm saying you've got all this data and you can't use it. But on the other hand, this is a hero of mine, a chap called Edwards Deming, and he was the guy who helped the Japanese rebuild their economy after the Second World War. And he had this phrase, which was, in God we trust, all others must bring data. And his point being, I'm not really interested in what your opinions are. Can you show me what the facts say? So on the one hand, you need the data, but on the other hand, I'm saying on it's nothing, you can't get hold of it. So the question is really, how are you going to use that data? So what this next slide shows is a method of using data. It's called the scientific method. And it really is all about learning. So if you want to have the data, the only point of having it is so you can learn something and do something new, make improvements. And so what the scientific method is fairly obvious, really, when you think about it, is you start off with plan. So you've got a hypothesis, something you think, well, that's a bit odd. And you plan an experiment to see what's going on. The next bit is you do, so you run the experiment. And then you check, so you check to see what happens. And then depending on what happens, then your experiment either works or it didn't work or is a bit partial. And then you act on it. So you either throw it away and go back to the drawing boards, or you roll it out across your organization, or you set up and have another experiment. So the trick is, of course, to run around that cycle, plan, do, check out, plan, do, check out, plan, do, check out. Because each time you go around the cycle, you learn something from your data and you can make improvements. Now, that's the scientific methods. Apparently, if you are a member of the US Air Force, and Top Gun School, I don't know if it exists, but this apparently is a thing, they will teach you something called the UDA Loop. So what's the UDA Loop? Well, it stands for OODA, which is observe, orientate, decide, and act. So if you are a pilot in a dogfight, what they'll teach you to do is observe what your opponent's doing, then orientate, create a mental model, decide what you think is happening, Then off the back of that mental model, then you decide what you are going to do, and then you act, and then you go back to observing to see what they do. Now, actually, when you think about it, that's not terribly dissimilar from the learning cycle or the scientific method I've just talked about. It's this whole process of cycling through what's happening, what am I going to do, what happens, what am I going to do next. But what is interesting is that the instructors apparently have a phrase, which is, they say, you need to get inside your opponent's loop. And what they mean by that is, the trick is to go around your OODA loop so fast that your opponent's reacting to a situation which is no longer there. Because if you can outthink your opponent and keep changing that quickly, then you'll win the dogfight. But actually, the same is true in business. If you can go through that scientific method and go through that loop faster than your opponent, then you can evolve faster than your opponent, and then you can win competitively. So it's all about speed. So another story. As I said, I used to work for Unilever. One of the ways Unilever makes money is out of soap powder. So apparently when you make soap powder, what you do is you mix together water and a whole load of different ingredients, and you create this sort of slurry of stuff. And you take that slurry and you pump it at pressure through a nozzle and you pump it into a vacuum chamber. And when you do that, all the water evaporates and the slurry turns into this lovely white powder. It looks a bit like snow. You shove it in a box and you sell it. And it's a good job they do, because I've got pension at Unilever, right? So that's the way they make soap powder. But they had a problem. And what happens is occasionally the nozzle will block. And when the nozzle blocks, the whole thing comes to a grinding halt. And, you know, you've got some poor fool's got to climb inside and unblock the nozzle, and they've got to reset everything, and they're shifting people around, and there'll be a supervisor jumping up and down, you can imagine. So having your nozzle block is a bad thing. So the plant managers decided that they would see if they could improve the nozzle. They brought in two teams of technicians and scientists to look at it. And the first team was your sort of your A team. So they got some chemical engineers, and they've got some process engineers, and some people who knew about thermodynamics. And they, what they did was they measured everything, and they looked at the volume of the vacuum chamber and the temperatures and how everything was running and what the pressure was. Yeah. And they took all of this information, and then they produced a new nozzle, and they put the new nozzle into production, and it sort of worked. You know, I don't know exactly, but 10% better. So then the second team rocked up, and the second team were a bunch of known hopers, right? So they'd employed a bunch of evolutionary biologists and geneticists to look at this problem. And you think to yourself, well, what on earth does a geneticist know about making soap powder? To which the answer is not much. But what these guys did instead was they said to the production team, they said, well, what's important? And the team said, well, obviously the quality of the soap powder and how long we can keep producing it for before the nozzle blocks. And they said, okay, so let's get some data on that then. And then they took the existing nozzle and they made 10 copies of it. And each of those copies, what they did was they made a slight change to it. So I don't know exactly how they did it. They got the Swiss Army knives out and they made a nick here and put an extra groove in there and just made 10 minor adaptations to each, to the nozzle. And then they ran these 10 nozzles and they measured what the quality was like and how long it ran for. And off the back of that, they had a winner. One of the 10 was better. Only very fraction, but it was a bit better. So they then took the best nozzle and they produced another 10 nozzles. We're all exact same copies of this nozzle. But again, they changed each one of those ever so slightly and ran each of those. So that was the first generation. And they went through this process, and they went through this process 20 times. So 20 different generations, and they just let evolution take its course. And each time they selected the nozzle which gave the best quality and ran for the longest. And after 20 generations, they've got all to be 199 failures and one winner. But that one winning nozzle will just wipe the floor with everything that's ever come before it. Nobody really knew what was going on or why it worked, but it was infinitely better. And the point of telling that story is that the trick is not to try and understand everything and nail everything down. The trick is to be able to learn really quickly and use the appropriate data to learn. So I suppose that's where I come to in terms of a data challenge. Yeah. The challenge isn't to be able to categorize everything and store everything. The challenge is to find a business problem, then get the relevant data, experiment, and then repeat that as quickly as possible. Yeah. And if you can do that, that is how you solve a business problem with your data. And yes, you need to store it, but let the technologists keep up. Yeah. Use the data to solve business problems. Of course, if you do that, you'll get some benefits, and you won't create yourself one day to create a big white elephant. So I hope that gave you something to think about over your sandwiches. I'm told there is a 15-second delay between Zoom and LinkedIn and getting some questions back. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions, but if there's a 15-second delay and it sounds like I'm on the moon, I'm not. I'm actually in Nottingham. It's not dissimilar, but I apologise for the delay in any answers. So there you go, Kerry. That's it. Were there any questions or anybody got any comments?
No, brilliant. No, thanks, James. I say, yeah, if anyone has got any questions, just put them in the comments box on the side and we can get to them. I've got that open, so yeah, they'll come through as soon as you put them through. They should come through. We can get that question answered. But yeah, no, thanks very much, James. It was very insightful and some great stories there shared to kind of help. So yeah.
15 seconds up yet. Can I go for my sandwich?
On the stream, it's showing the white elephant page. So we'll give it a couple of more seconds, see if any questions come in. But yeah. Yeah, so on the stream, it's just asking at the moment if there's any questions with the 15-second delay. So yeah, if anyone has got any questions, we're here for them. So yeah, but no, I say I love some of them stories. I think it's a good point. You know, people do just kind of try to overcomplicate the data strategy when actually just kind of looking at it a bit more simple and keeping to the points that are required. It's something definitely to think about and take away. Oh, here we go. So we do have one from Lynn Anderson, which says, data can tell whatever story you want, how to select the most objective.
Oh, that's a very good question, isn't it? Yeah. What do I think? So I think you wander off into a whole different question there about organizational culture and whether or not people are prepared to be open to what is really happening, or whether or not people would far rather disguise the issue. So yeah, sorry, I really don't have a question to that. I think it comes, sorry, an answer to that. It really comes down to the culture of the organization, and whether it's an organization that really wants to improve, or whether it's an organization that wants to tell a good story. So sorry, no obvious answer to that. It's really down to the individual and what they say and what they think.
Yeah, great stuff.
Sorry. Do apologize, Lynn. Very valid point. I don't have a magic bullet.
I think that's it though, isn't it? Really, say it is a really great point by Lynn. You know, data can tell whatever story you want it to. You know, you can look at the data for anything. You know, if you want it to show that it's going to be sunny tomorrow, then you can go look at the data. It's going to show the time the sun's out. And Lynch just put fair point, thanks. You know, if you want to look at, is it going to rain tomorrow, you could go and find the 1 hour it's going to rain tomorrow from a very simple format. I get it, but yeah, you know, you can implement the data to get it. So we've also had Andrew Ward has come in, who's just put it's good to get your thoughts on the data analytics side, e.g. null hypothesis and Bayes.
Well, and I suppose that, I wonder if that is the Andrew Ward that I know. If it is, hello Andy, good to hear from you. Yeah, so I suppose it's really clear. I mean, it comes back to my point about the plan, do, check, act. What is the hypothesis that you want to check, and what do you expect is going to happen? And I think you can get really cute about the statistics of it, and there are a whole load of really valid models. But most organizations aren't really that sure about what the hypotheses that they want to check, and really aren't capturing the data in the first place. So I'm a little bit flat earth on this. The question is, are you really clear about what you think? And have you got any data that supports that? Yeah, rather than getting into huge levels of detail about statistical significance. Of course, it depends very much on the organization that you work for. But I think, yeah, just being clear, what's the problem, and what would need to be true to demonstrate that you fixed it, would be a really good place to start.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's it. That's a great point, and hopefully that helps Andy there for you. So if there's any more questions, I say we'll give it a few seconds because of the delay. But yeah, if anyone's got any more questions, we're here. So Andy said thanks. Anyway, Andrew said thanks, James. Anyway. So we've had one more here from Jason Bell, who said, James, do you think often enough we know what problem we are trying to solve?
So the answer to that, Jason, is I've made a career out of asking people, what is the problem we're trying to fix? So probably not, no. I think there's an awful lot of woolly thinking and people acting to show that they're doing something rather than doing, and you know, action in and of itself is a good thing, rather than being clear about what is the problem, how do I know it's a problem, how would I know I fixed it? So in answer to your question, Jason, no, I don't think they do.
Perfect. Yeah, if any more questions, Lynn just said good session, thanks as well. So thanks for joining, Lynn. I'm glad you found it useful, and hopefully the answer to that Jason helps from James there help you just kind of think. I think that's it. You know, the reason we do these sessions is just to kind of make people think about kind of what they do in their strategy and just kind of think about a different approach. So some great questions, thank you. And yeah, so Jason's just put great presentation, James, really useful, thanks. And so I just want to echo that. Thank you very much, James, and thanks everyone for joining. I hope you found it really useful. We'll give it a couple more seconds just to see if we've got any last questions with the delay. If not, we'll end it there. I don't know if you had anything else to add, James, before we end it.
No, thank you very much for listening. I hope it was entertaining and enjoy your sandwiches.
Great stuff.